Story 1. Why I Never Wear Halloween Masks. Halloween was my favorite time of the year. I was still trying to figure out what to wear with my friends for trick-or-treating later that evening. My black cat Cassandra purred at my feet as I scrolled on my phone for ideas. I was petting Cassandra when my mother walked into the parlor where I was lounging. "Kylie, why don't we go to the thrift store to look for a costume? There's always hidden gems at the thrift store." Halloween can wait till we find the perfect costume. We don't have to be at Jessica's house till at least 7, so you have plenty of time to find something unique. That was the thing about my mother. She was always right. We hopped in her SUV and headed over to the thrift shop. When we got there, it was busier than I expected. Once inside, there was a sale on all lighting products like lamps, light bulbs, all the things you would need to light up any room. It kind of explained why there was such a crowd at the shop. I meandered over to the seasonal section. I'll admit, there wasn't much to choose from, but I tried on a couple of masks. One was the Bride of Frankenstein, and another was a knockoff of Strawberry Shortcake, which gave off the Strangers vibes. There was another I found under a pile of other plastic masks. It was an older mask of a giant jack-o'-lantern head, made of paper mache, lightly painted orange. It was faded and strange-looking, as if it had history. I picked it up, and a shiver went through me. There was something about it. I had to have it. My mother came over to me holding the blouse and an old broom. "That's cool. Are we getting it?" I nodded. I was happy to finally get something that would be original. Not one of my friends would have a mask like mine. I put it on in the car, and my mom giggled. "Okay, Kylie, you can take it off." I slid the mask off, but something felt strange. As I slid the mask off my cheeks, they tingled, feeling a bit numb, as if the blood was rushing back into my face. I didn't give it a second thought at the moment. I had so much excitement running through my veins. Once inside my house, I went straight to my room to find the rest of the costume that I would wear later. I decided on a casual black dress and black tights. It was casual, but that eerie look I was going for, so I put the pumpkin head mask back on, and then I immediately felt sick. I began to lose my vision. It blurred, and the aroma of something rotten filled my nostrils. I tried taking the mask off, but then I saw them. There were 3 other masked figures standing in my room, looking at me. They, too, had on similar masks, only they were made into animal masks with real bits of animal furs and skins. They smelled. One of them stopped in front of me, and I nearly passed out. Where did these people come from? "We have our 4th now," said one of them with the rabbit mask head on. Suddenly, they began to all grab me and pull me towards my closet. I fought with everything I had in me, but soon they pulled me inside, slammed my closet door, and within seconds, a portal opened up, and we entered another realm. There was now a door behind us, covered in old purple paint and vines. We walked some ways into the darkness. The forest was barren of all light. Then they stopped dragging me, as we all 4 stopped. There, in front of me, were some woods surrounded by the blackness of night, but in the distance was a bonfire. The masked figures dragged me towards the bonfire, and I was rendered sick to my stomach. The air was thick, clouded by something burning, and the smoke caught in my lungs as I tried to hold my breath. On top of the fire was a mass grave of bloody bits and body parts, all searing into the fire pit. I gasped silently behind the large pumpkin mask. The 3 other figures had me stand near them as they moved closer to the bonfire of blood. I tried to run, but before I could even think of it, one of the masked figures grabbed me. I looked at him, and he had a giant sugar skull mask on, like something you would see for Day of the Dead. I had not really looked at them close enough. Now the skull figure was yelling into my face. "You have to stay here and wait for this to be completed. If you don't, we'll all have to keep doing this." I was scared, feeling a small tear falling slowly down my face. And something from the forest moved. Something tall. Something you could not see. Fear rallied around me happily as if it were glad to see me here. There was something with makeshift horns on top of its head. Its body was rotten and torn open, revealing a skeletal set of bones wrapped around a beating heart. It had horse-like legs and reached an enormous height of 20 feet off the ground. I felt my skin grow hot, and I realized I was close to the bonfire of blood and bits now. I stepped back and watched in awe. The creature's head had a long face, like that of a horse, and its eyes were sewn shut. Maggots fell from the creature's half-torn open, bloodied skull. It wore a sack around its shoulders, and then it let out a loud groan. It was as if it was in pain. The screams came now. I looked at the forest, and behind this enormous monstrosity of horror were tiny creatures made of bird feathers and bones. For all I knew, they were bones. I couldn't see them with the firelight hitting my eyes. Bouncing off tree branches with their feathered arms and legs, they screeched, growing ever closer to the fire pit of blood. I felt my body shaking as I watched them. It was a nightmare. This was something out of a horror novel. What I was watching didn't make natural sense. Nothing I had experienced here made sense. "Make her go into the fire," one of the figures was saying. "She isn't ready," said another. A low growl erupted from beneath my feet. I looked down to see the earth was vibrating beneath all of us. I could see it now. A large, black, fur-covered claw hand, the size of a cell tower, reached out of the sky and picked at the bloody bits on top of the fire. It picked out legs, arms, throwing some aside, and then it picked up one severed head of a man who had been wearing a suit and tie before his head was severed. The tie hung from his chin. The pieces of him disappeared high into the smoke-covered sky and disappeared. I found my scream then. I began to run for my ever-loving life through the woods. I ran back the way we'd come, and I didn't stop till I saw what I only hoped was the doorway from which we came. A purple door awaited me, and as I reached for the door handle, I felt something grab at me from behind and try to lift me away from it. It was that giant clawed hand. I held on to the door, and then it ripped my head clean off. That's when I felt myself slipping from it. I had only gotten the mask, thank God. That stupid pumpkin head mask now disappeared high into the sky like the severed head had. I screamed and opened the door. I felt myself fall into my closet, and the door slammed behind me, disappearing, as if it had never existed. Behind me, I felt their world slip away, and the screams were now a distant memory. Before the portal closed completely, I couldn't help wondering what in the hell was going on there. I didn't care to know anymore, though. I wanted to be home, and I wanted to be safe. I opened my closet door and jumped onto the carpeted floor of my bedroom as if my life depended on it. I took a deep breath, and I felt sweat pouring down my head. I looked around my bedroom, hoping I'd soon wake from some delusion or daytime night terror. Then I heard my mother yelling for me to see if I'd finished dressing up. I looked around my bedroom, looked at my closet at the end of my bed. Surely I had something still in there to put on. I didn't want to open the closet door. So instead, I opened up the chest at the foot of my bed. I found an old witch's hat from one of the years prior and put that on. With my black dress and hat, I managed to pull off the perfect costume. I met my mother at the foot of the steps. "Kylie, I thought you were going to wear that old pumpkin head for Halloween this year." I shook my head. "Nah, it had a funny smell and it made me sick to my stomach. I am never wearing a mask again." With that, we left to go to Jessica's. That was one of the most unforgettable Halloweens I have ever had. I tried not to think about what happened to those other masked figures. I often wondered where they came from and why they needed a fourth person to help them. I didn't want to think about it anymore. That all happened a long time ago. I'm now 21 and living with my best friend Jessica. I mean, I've had a lot of Halloween since that year, but something happened recently reminding me of all that I experienced that time I got taken through the closet door on Halloween. A few weeks ago, I was at another thrift store, and I saw a mask that was identical to the sugar skull that figure had on when I was taken through my closet door. I was instantly fearful of it. My stomach became nauseous at the sight of it. I decided to buy it, though, because I was too afraid that what happened to me would happen to someone else. As I walked towards the counter, I looked down on a table with rabbit figurines. There, on the table, was a mask exactly like the rabbit figure had been wearing. This was getting too strange. And like when I was a little girl, the masks called out to me. I had to buy them both. I didn't recall what the other figure had on, but this had to mean something. Driving home, I felt the strangest sensation with them in my car. I could not wait to get home. When I pulled into my driveway, I grabbed the bag with the masks on and went inside my house. I felt a bit off the second I entered the parlor. I walked into my kitchen and grabbed a glass of ice water. I sipped it, and then I heard something outside. It sounded like someone was screaming. I didn't know who or what it was. There was nobody there. Now, feeling uneasy, I stepped into my living room and opened the bag with those masks. To my utter shock, they were now covered in blood. I dropped them on my living room floor and ran into my kitchen. My kitchen grew dark for a moment. I looked up at the window, and now a giant eyeball was peering in at me. I ran from the kitchen back to my living room. I could hear voices calling out to me. "You didn't finish what you started. You didn't finish what you started. You didn't finish what you started." I didn't know what else to do. I tore open the bag with the masks and turned on my stove. I threw the masks onto the kitchen stove and watched as the fire burned through them. Suddenly, I felt at peace. The eyeball was now gone from my window. I leaned back, forgetting myself for a moment, and touched the fire on the stove stupidly. Screaming, I looked down and saw that part of my flesh had burned into the fleshy paper mache of the masks. I felt something leave the room. I don't know. Maybe I've lost my mind, but burning my hand, even though it hurt like hell, and I needed a skin graft after, was so embarrassing. I think that even though I had done that, I had basically given them what they wanted. Given them my flesh, whoever the hell they were. So yeah, I'll never wear another Halloween mask again. Story 2. The Frightman's Witch. A fall breeze blew brown and red leaves over a decaying forest floor. It was where all the things came to die. A man walked amongst the forest, being careful not to trip over pumpkin flesh from the local children who liked to smash pumpkins up against the old oaks. The ground was slushy and slippery from the guts of pumpkin kings from October's past. It was like he, the Frightman, who made his way up the cemetery hill, sliding and slipping on gourds. Everyone knew who the Frightman was. He was tall, had a lanky build, walked with a severe limp, a sinister scowl peering out from black, greasy hair, and smelled like death with a beguiled look in his eyes. He never amounted to much in this sad and uneventful life, except scaring the children that lived in Newbury Hills. It was only in dedicated urban legends you heard of the Frightman's tales. He'd creep into the window of any child on their 13th birthday, do unspeakable things to them, all the while their bodies lay paralyzed. A vicious type of rumor, only slightly based in reality. The Frightman had done serious time for the assault and murder of his young daughter. She had just had her 13th birthday. Shortly after she'd gone to bed, the Frightman supposedly came into her room and carried out the horrific crime. The Frightman denied it, claiming he'd been asleep when his daughter was murdered. He'd been drinking most of the day, which only hurt his case. In reality, someone else had entered his daughter's bedroom, someone that had been a good friend of the Frightman, someone that he still to this day never knew was the real culprit. Fading out of the lives of everyone he ever befriended or loved, his presence became burdensome. The only job he could get was that of a grave digger. He mostly worked nights, keeping himself busy, trying to forget the urge to end his life. The only thing from his former life was a small portrait of Emily, his daughter. In his right coat pocket, the softness remained, but so did the sadness, the anguish, and the memories of his time in a prison cell where he was beaten daily, called names, and fed on a strict diet of hatred. One evening, as the dew formed amidst tall grass in the Newbury Hills Cemetery, he saw a young girl running past him. Confused, he called out to her. She didn't listen to him, instead running towards an uncleared part of the surrounding forest that grew around the cemetery. He tried calling out to her again, fearing she could be horribly injured. The last thing he needed was another child getting injured near him. Tossing his shovel aside, he began to chase her. He'd nearly caught up to her when all at once he saw the young girl duck into the bushes. Now he knew there was no way she could have done so, because it was filled with rose thorns and bramble. The Frightman bent over to see where she went, when he heard a shrill voice. "Looking for something?" Confused, he turned around to see an old woman in front of him. She wore a long black shawl, had a mass of gray hair under a twisted and pointed hat. She looked the very image of a Halloween witch. A girl. She ran through here. Did you see her?" "Let me guess. Dark brown hair, cut to her shoulders, no shoes, long white nightgown." The Frightman looked at her, puzzled. He nodded. "Yes, I did see her, but she's not here anymore." "Oh, well, I was worried she might be harmed out here. It's late. Children should be in bed." "Oh, so you can corrupt their bodies with your filth?" she asked, slyly. "Better get back to work," said the Frightman, limping as quickly as he could back to the cemetery. "Oh, but I know who you are. You're the Frightman. Everyone knows who you are. Why you did time in prison, why nobody wants you around, and everybody wishes your kind were dead. He walked away from her, but the old witch didn't stop talking. Oh, but what they don't know is you're innocent. The frightman stopped in his tracks, his back still turned away from the old crone. No, I'm as terrible as they say. I love hurting children, erasing their innocence, choking them till they can barely breathe, and bashing in their tiny skulls for my own sick pleasure. Hogwash, she said, now with an angry look in her eyes. You're no more a rapist and murderer of children than I am the Queen of England. I've come because there's been an injustice, an imbalance of nature, and this town could use more good men like you, she said, pulling out a sharp wooden wand. The frightman tried walking away. He knew what he was, and it wasn't someone who took pleasure out of hurting kids, but he'd become a marked man, and no matter how hard he screamed and tried to tell his story, no one cared to listen. I don't know what you want, but I've got to get back to work. With a flick of her wrist, she parted the forest trees in front of him and lit his path. Very well. But living in darkness, I think you need a bit of light. The frightman turned around in shock as to what the old witch had done. How? Let me help you. Why would you want to help me? Balance. What's in it for you? She grinned. She waved her wand, and there was a little girl again, only she was in a fog, and rather than being there in reality, it was like a film was playing out before him. The little girl was running from a man, his face shrouded in shadows, but you could see clear as day what was about to happen. I don't want to see this. Shut it down. The frightman called out to the old woman, but she let the scene play out. The man, the little girl, and then screams, and then nothing. Until the face of the man was finally revealed. Not a shiver went down the frightman's spine. Instead, a sharp pain entered his soul. Something forbidden and something erased his ability to see clearly without rage now. It couldn't be, could it? That man, he looked so familiar. That little girl, you see, was me, she said, and the man is someone we both now know. They called him friend, but he was no one's friend. He was friends with our family, and when I told what he'd done, he vowed to kill me. Only my powers had only come in. After all, I had just turned 13. He left our town because my mother would have him burnt alive, so he ran before that could happen. That was my one mistake. My mother's too. He is going to die. The frightman thought long and hard about it. The man, he'd been a friend. His name was Richard Blythe. He was a lot older now, but he still recognized him. How had he not seen it? The frightman was angry now, seething even as the old woman calmed him down. I know, dear, you'd like to skin him alive, tear his flesh from between his legs, and set him on fire. But all good things. That night, the frightman and the old witch hatched a plan. The following morning, fog rose up into the town, like that which no one had ever seen. It was thick with a greenish glow, and the townsfolk were afraid to leave their homes for fear they would get lost, as they became prisoners of the fog now. The witch walked into the center of town, using her new friend, the frightman, to help her carry a large wooden box. Eventually, she waved her hand and caused the fog to fade enough for the townsfolk to be curious enough as to what was going on. When they saw the fright men, a few of them shut their windows and blinds, locking their doors, as if that could stop what was about to come. It was long before someone shouted, "What's the meaning of this?" The witch laughed. "You ask the meaning, but you do not see. I'm here for a dead man walking. I've hired your grim fiend, the fright man, to help me carry the man to his grave." No one said anything. They were puzzled looks. Some rolled their eyes or just went back to their chores. The witch looked at the fright man. His demeanor changed. He suddenly grew confidence he'd never known he still had after everything he'd been through. "I've been sentenced to a life of shame for a crime I didn't commit. All the while, the real evil lives amongst you. You protect him. You give him shelter and you give him friendship. I once called him friend. Today he shall pay for what he did." "This box has a home for you, Richard Blythe," said the witch. Gasps erupted from the townsfolk, who all looked disgusted and shocked to see how these two would accuse such a good, kind man as Robert Blythe of crimes that the fright man had done prison time for. "It's okay, everyone." Richard Blythe stepped forward. "Richard has helped us with our farms. Let us eat. When we had nothing, he helped us with labor. He's a good man," someone called out. The witch grew tired of their words. Then she put up a portal of light. Inside it, she showed the townsfolk Richard Blythe sweating when he was fat and horrific as he chased her when she was just a girl. The townsfolk turned their eyes away. "You have all chosen not to see me. You all have chosen to look upon true darkness without seeing true darkness. So from this day forward, you shall all be blind." The sudden screams that erupted from the crowd pierced the fright man's ears. Richard Blythe looked upon the witch and the fright man. "Henry, my friend, please help your townsfolk. Don't let this evil witch make misery of them." The fright man looked at Richard Blythe with disgust. "Not till you confess how you murdered my daughter. I know it was you." "Come out, Henry. Everyone knows you were drunk. It's a tragedy. Are you really going to let this evil woman make you see something that isn't real?" "Even now, with all your friends and neighbors suffering, you still refuse to confess? You selfish, disgusting, and vile man." The witch picked up Richard Blythe with her bare hands and threw him inside the wooden box. She used her magic to nail it shut. Thinking that was it, the plan had been enacted. The fright man helped her push the wooden box into the river. The townsfolk were still fearful and blind. "Won't you let them have their sight back? We got what we wanted. He's going to drown now in that river. Slowly, and he will now pay for what he did." The witch smiled. "Come out of your homes, and I will give you your sight back." Every townsperson came out of their homes to see again. "You can thank your fright men for being able to see." She laughed and waved her long stick of a wand at them. They all smiled, some with tears, some were confused, and a few a little angry. The witch followed back towards the river, watching the box with Richard Blythe sink as he screamed inside of it for help. The fright man looked at her. "Thank you." She smiled. "The best is yet to come, my dear," she said. The fright man thought of his future. Hope washed over him because now he had told his truth. He looked at the witch as she walked away. He heard someone screaming. Then he heard another scream. Someone was shrieking. He turned towards the townsfolk, and each one of them began to disintegrate. Their body parts exploded. Legs, then their stomachs, then hands, then arms, then each head popped off in a vile display, blood and guts. And the only part of them that was still alive were their eyes, watching as one another, in horror, died one by one. The fright man stood in the bloody mass and just watched, trying to understand. The only ones that escaped were the small children. They ran from their homes and followed the witch into the woods, into the darkness. The fright man heard her laugh. Oh, fright man, now, Henry, you can really start anew. He was still in shock. The fright man had not expected this to happen. He thought the only one they'd punish would be Richard Blythe. The fright man ran from the town. It was said he started a new life, changed his name, but those that hurt children are reminded in their prison cells to be ready for when the fright man's witch comes for them, because she always does. She always does. Story 3. It was just a movie, wasn't it? Ricky sat on his sinking couch. Coke cans and Dorito bags covered his coffee table. He grabbed one more handful of chips and started his VCR. He loved older movies. He could quote every line from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, The Godfather, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Ricky wiped his hands on his old shirt and sat back to watch the movie. It was one he'd bought off eBay, a movie he'd never seen, and he had only heard about through the seller he bought most of his collections from. He was told it was immersive like no other horror flick. Ricky wasn't sure if it would live up to the hype. Few movies ever did. He'd always loved old school items like projectors from the 1980s, TVs, VCRs, and cassette tapes. Ricky had spent thousands of dollars on some of these things. Okay, let's get into it. I hope this is worth the $45 I paid for my rare experience, Ricky said to no one. There was a knock at his front door. He sighed, hating to move out of his seat just as his movie was starting. He paused the grainy film and went to answer the door. Outside, there was a group of boys, all in costumes. "Trick or treat," one of them said. Ricky had completely forgotten it was Halloween. He groaned and turned off his porch light. Ricky felt uneasy by the sight of them. They were all in the same costume. They were all dressed up like little trolls, but each one wearing a different colored jacket. Sorry guys, I'm out of candy this year." "But you left your porch light on," said one of the kids in a blue jacket with that realistic troll mask on. "Yeah, you don't have any candy?" asked a second kid. He wore a yellow jacket, but his mask was just the same. Too realistic. How much were parents spending on costume these days, Ricky thought. Look at this loser. He probably can't afford it. Look at his gross house, said another boy. Is that a VCR? What century do you think this is, dude? It was the boy in the yellow jacket. He pulled out a raw egg from a second bag he was carrying over his shoulder. He threw it at Ricky's face, and as the yellow yolk fell down his cheeks, he yelled at them to get off his property. Ricky went in, slamming his front door. He used the same t-shirt to wipe off the egg from his face. "Little bastards," he muttered to himself, and then restarted his movie. Ricky leaned back into his couch and pressed play. The movie started. The intro was a cemetery filled with fog and sounds of wolves howling in the background. It looked a bit grainy. Ricky was waiting for something to happen. Then the camera panned into an old woman, all in black, saying a prayer at a faded headstone. Suddenly the woman looks up at the sky. She begins to have a fearful look in her eyes, uncertain what to do. She tries to run from whatever it is when she looks at the camera. Ricky, watching, began to feel uneasy. He sat up in his seat on the couch, still shoving chips into his mouth. The woman screamed, and then Ricky's doorbell rang. What the fuck? Ricky got up from his seat and opened the door. There, on his porch, was another kid in his Halloween costume. It was the kid from earlier wearing that same yellow jacket and that creepy troll mask. "You again? Didn't you hit me in the face with an egg? Now you're back for more?" I just wanted to apologize. I didn't mean to hit you in the face with an egg." "Well, you did. Sorry, I still don't have any candy. And I wouldn't give it to you kids anyway, even if I did have it. Now fuck off." The kid stood there on Ricky's porch as Ricky slammed the door in his face. He was mad, but felt better about saying something back to defend himself this time, after that egg assault. Ricky sat down and resumed his movie. The old woman was still screaming, "No! No!" Something was grabbing the woman and dragging her. Ricky immediately involved himself when the doorbell rang for the third time. Now what? Ricky was red-faced as he opened the door. He suddenly felt the cold, mushy musings of the egg yolk again. This time, all of the kids came back, and they all had eggs. Ricky was pissed and started to lunge at them. In the midst of running, he slipped on egg yolk and scraped his knee pretty badly. "Stupid-ass kids. I'm calling the cops if I see you again." He could hear their hysterical laughter as he managed to get up and walk back into his house. Ricky slammed the door and locked it. He was covered in egg from head to toe. He fished around in the seat cushion of his couch and pulled out a kitchen towel he'd been using when he ate dinner. It hadn't been washed in God knows how long. Ricky didn't bother changing his clothes. He was a man defeated, wallowing in his circumstance. He cracked open another Coca-Cola and chugged it, as if he was a marathon runner chugging water at the end of a race. He let out a long, loud belch and then pressed play on the movie. The old woman was screaming, and she was being dragged into a hole in the ground. Ricky let out a deep breath, and his eyes entered the world on his TV screen. Ricky felt his body get comfortable, and as he watched the TV scenes before him, it seemed to get more and more familiar. On screen, he saw a green creature dragging the woman, tearing her into pieces. The scene cut to black. Now he was watching another scene, this time of a house not unlike his own or anyone's these days. A tiny Cape Cod with white siding that looked like it could use some updates. An unmanicured lawn in front of it with dead grass and tall weeds growing from cracks in the concrete driveway. There were children trick-or-treating in front of the house. Ricky took a deep breath. The tension was building, but nothing extraordinary had occurred. There was a sudden knocking at the front door. Ricky was getting angrier now than he was the last time. He swung open the door, but this time it was a woman. She was old. She had a long black dress on, and in her hands was a rosary. There was something familiar about this woman. Hello. Hi? My, you look unfazed. Have you not been watching what's going on? Ricky looked at her for a long moment. What a night he'd been having. He had no idea what this woman was talking about. They will keep coming back like they did for me. The old woman had desperation in her voice. I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about. Is there someone that's looking for you? Someone I could call to come pick you up? You're not listening. The woman hit Ricky in the chest with both of her fists, and he fell back into his house. It pissed him off, and once he got his balance back, he grabbed the doorknob and began to shut the door on her. You're not listening. They're coming for us both. Ricky slammed the door in the old woman's face, and now found himself not wanting to watch his movie any longer. But when he looked at the television, it was paused on what now looked like his own living room. Hey, dumbass. Thought you liked spooky movies. Ricky turned around, and there in front of him were those kids from earlier in their troll masks. Only now they didn't look like masks. They were real. How'd you get in my house? Ricky yelled. They stood looking at him with giant grins on their troll faces. Ricky stepped forward and poked one of the boys, or what he thought was a boy. The face was dark, green, and slimy. The skin was wrinkled and aged, and it wasn't rubber or latex. The eyes on the boy with the yellow jacket glowed orange, and when he smiled, his teeth were short but sharply wicked. Ricky began to piece things together all at once, the woman, the kids, that uncanny feeling. Ricky turned his attention toward his television. He saw his own home, but it was from the perspective of looking outside in. In the windows, those monstrous children were waving at him. Outside, he could hear the old woman banging on his front door. It was beginning to turn his brains into mush with this reality now of what the movie on his television. Ricky began to scream, and he ran for his remote. He turned off the television and ejected the movie. As soon as he did, the troll children disappeared, as did the woman on his front porch. Ricky fell into his couch. He pulled the VHS tape from his VCR and put it back in the box that it came in. A rush of relief came over him as he shoved another handful of chips in his mouth. It was just a movie, he said out loud.